Hello and welcome to the second of my videos about Anthony Riley's dissertation, in which he attempts to um, make a legal case that flat earth ideas should be taught in the national curriculum in the UK. Now, in the first little video that I made, we mentioned that, or I mentioned that the dissertation is full of spelling and grammatical errors. And while I can sort of forgive these, it does reveal something about the writer, that they would be so slipshod when submitting a thesis, especially one that is criticizing the education system. Um, I think the education system has many things wrong with it, and I think that the person writing this particular dissertation reveals many of those problems. Not only are they seem incapable of writing good English and checking the spelling and grammar, but they also seem to be completely scientifically illiterate and incapable of critical thinking and assessing a body of evidence in a sort of comprehensive way and a critical way. Equally worrying, this is supposed to be a legal argument, is the fact that the basis for the legal argument seems to be a mistaken understanding of the meaning of some words. The Education Act of 1996 prohibits the teaching of partisan politics, and not only in classes but also in extracurricular activities and so on. And it states that where political issues arise, a balanced view should be given. Now, this was tested by a case in which someone complained about Al Gore's climate change film being shown to school children. And this was a political film. I mean, it was designed to create a political motivation to do something about climate change before it became too late. So it had a lot of science in it, but it had a lot of politics in it as well. Or it was very political in the way that it presented the science. And I think it was probably a good idea that it was challenged. Now, Anthony latches onto the fact that in the course of his judgment about this in this case, the judge stated that the word partisan in the phrase partisan politics could be interpreted to mean one-sided rather than referring to party political, i.e., of the Labour Party, of the Conservative Party, of the Liberal Democrat Party, or the Brexit Party, or whatever. Anthony has latched onto this and interpreted it as the judge stating that one-sided, a partisan or one-sided teaching of any subject is prohibited by the Act. And I don't think that is true. There may be political things that arise in science subjects. For example, in biology, there might be some suggestion that one race of people was genetically superior to another, or intellectually superior to another. And that would be a rather political kind of statement. Or it might be claimed that being gay was definitely not genetic, or definitely had a genetic component, and so on. And that would certainly have some political connotations. And so it might be possible to interpret that this should be presented in a very balanced way. And I think it probably should be. And I think most teachers would do that anyway. But most of teaching in schools should be one-sided. We should teach the germ theory of disease, and not that equally or at all that diseases are caused by evil spirits or that diseases are caused by having wicked thoughts or any other crazy notion. We should teach that elements are made up of atoms, because they are. There's no alternative that has any validity. We should not teach, as was believed by the ancient Greeks, I think, that there are four elements of earth, air, fire, and water. This is not true and should not be taught, even though there may be people today who still cling to that kind of idea on the basis that they think people from thousands of years ago knew better than we know today. 1 + 1 = 2. We shouldn't teach anything different. And the word fiduciary, for example, is correctly spelled with 2 I's and not with 1 I, as Anthony did. So teaching will be one-sided in many cases and should be so. The difficulty, perhaps, is deciding when something is sufficiently contentious that it should be given an alternative explanation should also be given. The case of whether vaccines are a good idea. It did seem for a short time that there was a problem with vaccines and their connection to autism. We now know that the science that claimed that was bad science, and that idea has been rejected. But for a year or two, biology teachers must have wondered whether they should present this as a valid subject. But as I say, the whole premise of Anthony's legal thesis seems to be somewhat spurious. However, it's when he starts talking about the science that things get really, really awful, because he gets it all wrong. Most of the argument he brings back to the heliocentric model of the solar system and the Copernican idea, description of the solar system as a heliocentric system. It's not contentious. It's a now established fact. It might have been contentious in the time of Copernicus, but everything we've learned since and everything that we knew before Copernicus actually confirms that Copernicus was right. Yes, the description has been refined and modified over the years so that we now have more accurate knowledge about the sizes of planets and their moons, and the orbits are more accurately mapped out, and so on. But the basic idea is correct, and there's no valid counter proposal. And so it should be a one-sided bit of teaching. Anthony then refers to the Eratosthenes experiment as being a way that the distance to the sun is measured. It isn't. The Eratosthenes experiment measured the circumference of the Earth. In doing that experiment and doing his calculation, he assumed the sun was a long way away, but he made no measurement of how far away it was. He simply assumed it was a long way away and that the sun's light reaching the Earth would do so in parallel, no matter where you were on the Earth. Now, that particular subject, that particular experiment has been repeated thousands and thousands of times. Many school children have done it. Many students have done it. And Anthony should be aware of a prominent flat Earth debunking YouTuber who did a very, very similar experiment, which showed that the light reaching the Earth from the Sun does indeed arrive at the Earth in parallel rays. And I'm going to show Sly Sparkane's video in a moment or two. So Anthony incorrectly states that Eratosthenes' experiment measured the distance to the Sun when it didn't. But he also claims that the result that Eratosthenes got, he could have got if the Earth was flat. Now, that may be true because Eratosthenes, if the experiment happened the way it's described, measured a shadow length in one particular location on the Earth. And he would therefore have got he could have assumed the Earth was flat and got a location for the Sun that would have been relatively close to the Earth. And he would have got a single location because he measured it in a single place. But as we shall see in a moment in Sly Sparkane's video, when you repeat the Eratosthenes type experiment in various locations over the whole Earth, you not only prove that the light from the Sun arrives at the Earth in parallel rays, it comes in parallel no matter where you are on the Earth, but it also proves that the Earth cannot be flat. And it confirms as well the size of the Earth, just as Eratosthenes actually demonstrated. So I think I'm going to show Sly Sparkane's video, and I'm going to end this particular video here at that point. And I will then make another video where we'll look at some of the other science that Anthony gets completely and utterly wrong in his rather poor dissertation. So here is Sly Sparkane's wonderful video. I'll put a link in the description, and thanks for watching.
Okay, first let me thank those who participated in this group exercise. Each participant in this experiment performed a simple test, Eratosthenes style. At the Sun's highest point at their location on the September equinox, they placed a shadow-casting object and measured its height, then measured the shadow length. With those two measurements, you can get the Sun's elevation angle above the horizon from that location. With this information, we can determine the shape of the Earth and the distance of the Sun from the Earth's surface. This is an azimuthal equidistant map, the favorite among flat Earth believers. The flat Earth claim is that the Sun is approximately 5,000 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. This determination is because when viewing the Sun on the equinox, which is directly over the equator, from the 45-degree latitude position, the Sun is 45 degrees above the horizon. When you couple that with the distance of the observation point to the equator, you get a rough distance of 5,000 kilometers. So geometry would say that the Sun's altitude is 5,000 kilometers. Seems pretty simple. With the results of our 23 participants, let's go ahead and examine that. If the close sun claim over a flat plane Earth were factual, then from any latitude, the shadow tests would all point directly at the sun in close proximity to the Earth's surface, and we could determine what the actual altitude is, if they all match up. Let's first mark the latitudes of all those who perform this test. So now, if the flat Earth claim were factual, these gray angles are what we should hope to see from all those who did the test. Let's go ahead and view the measurement results from each test. As you can see, the elevation angles do not conclude a single point where one could say that the sun is located. Well, except for Joshua. His seemed to hit. So Joshua, if you turn flat earther, I totally, sorta understand. So now I'll remove this target, and we'll see what this looks like if we apply all these lines to their latitude locations on a globe. So as you can see, this concludes that all angles are within less than 1 degree of perpendicular to the Earth's axis, pointing at a vastly distant sun. And if we took all the stick angles, they all point directly to the center of our big round Earth. The conclusion is pretty apparent. Earth is not a flat plane, the sun is not close, as proved here with repeatable experimentation. I would also like to note a complete lack of participation from flat earthers during this experiment. For those who seem to be seeking the truth, you sure don't want to participate in finding it. Y'all have a nice day.
Oh my god.